Welcome to podcast 17 of Drum Education Live. Subscribe to the channel, press the bell, vote for us. We're running for president this year. Thank you very much.
That's a new one. Cool. So welcome to the podcast. Today we've got Spike Smith. Spike Smith is...
Hello. I'll clap.
Hello, how are you doing?
Bolster the numbers.
Yes.
So Spike and I met on Facebook about 3 or 4 years back, didn't we? We started talking about double bass drum. And subsequently I sort of looked into some of Spike's playing, and he played with the Damned and Morrissey. They're kind of, I think, your two kind of most famous gigs, I think. And then I went to see you. Was it about meditation, wasn't it? You were playing with
Yeah. Do you know that was 3 years ago, kind of next week, because I just had a reminder that, well, you know, one of those memory things you get on your Facebook.
Yeah.
You know, and I was going to a rehearsal, and that must have been 3 weeks ago. I don't know, yesterday, and that tour was a week later. So we're not far off 3 years for that mark, and I guess we must have been talking before that, eh?
Yeah, so it's quite a while we've known each other sort of online, and yeah, I went to see Spike play in Brixton, and that was really cool to see. And it was I think we kind of share some influences, some stuff from punk and thrash metal, that kind of thing. Definitely. So I think we'll start because Kira's got her list. Have you got your list with you today?
Yeah.
How many questions?
How does
There's a
the
list
screen...
of questions.
Okay, how does the screen swap, or does it just swap? I'm just curious because I'm not done a lot with the Zoom.
It should stay.
We normally,
I think.
Whoever's speaking.
yeah, if you've got it on speaker mode, the person talking will come up. If you put it in gallery mode, it will be everybody next to each other.
Okay, what's the best way have you found for interaction with it?
I think
I prefer gallery mode.
Yeah, I like
make
to
the
see
gallery
everyone.
mode. I can't see that.
So it should be
on the top right corner.
Top right.
Oh, right, okay. No, I haven't got. Oh, I can see gallery view. Oh, right, okay, cool. Right.
Oh, there now.
Hey, look at that. Okay.
So now we've got gallery views.
It's like now it looks like the YouTube that I've been watching your shows on.
Yeah.
This is why we don't ask our guests to record, Spike.
Yeah.
Okay, so Kira has her famous list of questions, so we're going to open with a question from Kira.
Okay.
First one.
Well, I just wanted to know about how you got started, if you had formal lessons, that kind of thing. How were you introduced to drums? Okay,
well, I've been, you know, like a fan of music and listening to music since I was a little kid. My dad was a musician, he was a guitarist. And so I used to go with him, you know, like, you know, to set his gear up or, you know, to collect his gear the day after, the usual kind of stuff. So I'd be around musical instruments like that. And for years as a kid, for years as a kid, I thought I was going to be a guitarist, you know, following in the footsteps of my dad. And I did try it at some point. I tried, you know, learning or getting the small guitar and trying it, and it didn't work out for me. And to sort of fast forward a little bit to my beginning with drums, just as I was hitting that teenager age, I'd got involved with punk and that, you know, this was like sort of like my, you know, my little calling, I suppose. And I'd started going to discos and doing all the things you do, you know, when you're in secondary school. And, you know, I was going out and buying my own records and things before, but I was still heavily influenced, as a lot of us are when we're young, by our parents' record collection. Yeah. You know, my dad had a lot of rock and roll, and, you know, that's the kind of the music of his choice. So I was a big fan of all, you know, the rock and roll singers of the time, you know, your Little Richard, Elvis, of course, Buddy Holly was a big one, Chuck Berry, you know, etc., etc. But when I got into secondary school and started going to discos, there was this new thing for me, punk. So I'd started going out buying the records of the day. This wasn't, you know, like the initial 77 thing. This was all a bit later. This was about, you know, 1979. So I just missed that first initial wave. So I was hearing all of these new bands, and I was going out every time I heard like a new, or seeing a band on Top of the Pops, etc. And then one of the bands that I'd seen and particularly liked and had, you know, like started buying records of were the Damned. And as Mark mentioned, I ended up playing for the Damned. But this is going back 20 years before that. And so I had a couple of records, and then one night, just quite simply, I must have, you know, come home from being out, you know, messing around with my mates and, you know, just hanging out. And my dad was watching the Old Grey Whistle Test. Now, I don't know, do you know of that program, the Old Grey Whistle Test?
Yeah.
It was kind of like, you know, almost, yeah, good. You know, it's kind of like, you know, like what Jules Holland is now. It was a program on BBC Two. You know, it'd have the bands on the day on that would come in and perform live, and, you know, and if they were out promoting something, there'd be, you know, some interviews and all of that kind of stuff. I wasn't aware of this program at all. I just came in, and my dad was sitting in the living room and he's watching this program, and I just sit down, and who should come on? The Damned. So I'm like, wow, you know, this is a band that I really like. And the funny thing is that, you know, in those days you'd buy a record, and you know, like I seen in one of your other interviews, you were talking about, you know, like the cover and the information. But of course, they didn't always have all the information you wanted. So I'd looked at, you know, like I had my Damned records, I'd looked at the covers, I'd seen a picture of these four crazy looking guys, but it never said who did what, you know. So I kind of made the presumption, weirdly, that enough, as I remember it, that Rat Scabies was the singer. I thought Dave Anion, you know, the vampire looking guy, was the bass player, you know, so I'd kind of got it wrong anyway. So, you know, they're watching, you know, the Old Grey Whistle Test, and they start, and or they get introduced and they start, and of course I'm like, whoa, the guy I thought the bass player is the singer, you know, the singer's playing the drums, kind of thing, you know. So I was like, watching it sort of, and it was and, you know, it's more energetic. The excitement for me, you know, I hadn't seen any of these bands. You know, it's not, you know, we all know it, you know, with YouTube that things have changed, but then you couldn't tune in to see something unless you were, you know, was about as good as it was going to get. And I wasn't aware at that point of the Old Grey Whistle Test, but, you know, I soon became it on this very night. Anyway, so I'm watching the band and I'm completely mesmerized. And that was it. You know, I was watching it. I was watching Rat Scabies, and I was literally like, you know, that's it. You know, I'm going to be a drummer. That was my motto. Yeah, that was it. It was like that, you know, the what is it? And the pit in the is the word, is it? You know, it's like, that's it. And the funny thing was, and I watched the whole thing and it blew my mind. And many years later, like during the time I was playing for them, somebody, because we still didn't have YouTube, you know, while I was playing for them, and, you know, and all of that kind of stuff to look back on. But a friend of mine who was an avid collector of, you know, punk videos, had managed to find somebody that had it, you know, and, you know, people would like tape trade, but video trade. And they found the footage. And when I watched the footage, they don't even get through the second song, and they, you know, they were doing two songs, a bit like Jules Holland, but they played them together, you know, so they didn't have one and then go round and then they do the second. They just played the two songs in succession. They didn't even get through the second song, and Rat Scabies just started smashing his equipment up, you know. And it was just like, whoa, you know, and I thought, that was, you know, when I looked back, I thought, you know, that is a crazy moment and a crazy thing to see as a 12-year-old. And you know, I mean, you know, just think about it now. Could you imagine seeing somebody like the Stereophonics doing that on Jules Holland, or anybody? They just wouldn't. Yeah. So so that was my moment, and, you know, that's how I got into drums. It would be a little while before I actually got a kit because, you know, once I'd made that decision, I then had to convince my parents that it was a good idea to get me a drum kit, you know, and of course I'd had my failed guitar attempt, so they weren't overly keen on, well, on either wasting money on the drum kit. And I grew up in a very small, you know, house, like a little cottage, really. So there wasn't much room either for a drum kit, and there certainly wasn't, you know, the tolerance for the noise that it was going to create. So that was the beginnings of it. Fortunately, in the end, you know, they ended up allowing me to get into the instrument. And the way it happened, actually, they were pretty supportive. Was a friend of my dad's was retiring, and they must have made some kind of arrangement to, you know, if the criteria was, my dad was taking me round to this gentleman's house who had this kit, and if I, you know, could knock out a rhythm or have some semblance of, you know, or some semblance of rhythm on the drum kit, and, you know, seem to have some kinship with it, then, you know, my dad would get the kit. But if it didn't work out, then, you know, definitely not, you know. But of course, like anybody that, when you're young and that, committed to the idea, you know, I'd spent time at home, you know, banging about, not on pots and pans, but one thing I used to do is I used to open my books up in my you know, my class. I'd get 2 books and I'd open them out, and that represented the 4 drums, you know. And then I would get my geography little box and, you know, set it to the right. That was my right symbol, and so I'd kind of be sort of, you know, playing like that and just banging on the floor for my foot. So lo and behold, and it was even a bit of a pleasant surprise to myself, when I got on the kit, I could play a beat, you know, but I couldn't just play it. You know, really, I'd spent a lot of time practicing it, you know, with my books and stuff like that. So that's you know, that was the beginnings for, that was the beginnings for me.
Cool.
Felipe.
I think my question is a little bit further along, so go.
Okay.
Okay.
Go on, Mark.
So,
I'm going to put my earphones back in just because I can hear it better.
yeah, no worries. Is that
all right,
coffee?
Philip?
Kira, have you got coffee?
Great. No, I think the question I have, I think, would be better further along in the conversation. So Mark, go ahead.
All right. So I wanted to ask about, because I came to see you play in quite a small venue in Brixton.
Yeah.
With Medication.
That's right.
You've done quite a lot of work on the punk scene, you know, over the years.
Yeah.
So I wondered how the scene's changed. Do you think it's different to how it was when you started? Is the audience still there? Has it got stronger? How has it changed over time?
Well, I mean, it's definitely changed because, you know, now you've got a lot of those older bands who are still playing, but you know, it's kind of like, it's kind of the thing that we never thought, you know, we thought would happen when we were younger, and there's a whole revivalist scene, you know. So now you've got, you know, festivals like Rebellion Festival. You've got Butlins that put on their alternative weekender festivals, and a whole host of others, you know. You've got Punk Rock Bowling in Las Vegas. These are all, you know, big festivals. They're not big in the sense of Reading or Glastonbury, but, you know, you can be playing between, you know, to 5,000 to 10,000 people, you know. So they're big enough. And that didn't exist then. So that is something that, you know, it I suppose has helped to keep the scene alive, because it's giving these, you know, bands an opportunity to still play and to continue to play. I mean, a lot of them, the respected ones, kept on playing anyway, you know. So the Damned would be an example, UK Subs, you know, there's a whole host of others. They never really stopped. They kept on playing. there's a lot that have reformed. Some of them only reformed to play those kind of events. It's, you know, it is a complete nostalgia trip for them, and you know, and they enjoy it, and the audience enjoys it too. Others have kept going, and it's, you know, it's a livelihood, and you know, and that helps. There's also a lot of newer bands that play on it as well. So that's good for them, because there's an audience potentially for them, you know, if they're a good and interesting band. And of course now, and it gives younger people a chance to come along to an event to see those older bands, you know. But well, what would we have all thought about it when we were 20? I don't know. You know, I mean, you know, we did used to mock that kind of thing when we were seeing the 70s bands doing their sort of, you know, glitter ball weekenders or whatever they'd call it. But it's not really that much different. Something that's, you know, like that is better about the scene in comparison to you know, back to the old days, is it's nowhere near as aggressive. You know, back then, you know, that punk scene, you know, it was very split. You had a big skinhead. It was, if you were slightly different, you know, strange coming from a scene that was already, you know, setting itself and celebrating the fact that it was different anyway. So sometimes gigs in the 80s, they were frightening. They weren't always pleasant. You wanted to go because you felt, well, you know, I really want to go and see that band, but you were also slightly fearful of what was going to happen. And a lot of the time, what you were fearful of did happen, you know, and then it became a question of how you were going to deal with that. So that has changed, and that's changed for the better. I mean, the things that I suppose have changed for the worse, it's harder to find bands that are, you know, as interesting or as original. You know, they're out there, but they're not quite so easy to find. And, you know, Mark, you'll know it through metal. You know, it's like, oh, you know, we'll all know it through a style of music that we like, that you look at it and think, oh, you know, it's not very interesting. You know, they all sound the same. I mean, with a more, you know, like the more newer extreme of metals, part of the problem is they all seem to have the same production technique, so they all sound very similar. You know, I mean, you know, obviously back in the day, you know, if a band came from, you know, well, even sort of regionally, you know, a band that you might have that came from, you know, in a punk thing, let's the approach, but you know that you still put them under the still music, you know, the musical banner. You can look at a metal band now that, you know, with a sound that you might consider to be very American orientated, and you know, they're from mid Wales, and you can't tell the difference.
Yeah.
You know, so that to me is not a positive thing, but it's how it is, you know.
Yeah, so there's a bit of a backlash coming against that at the moment, and it's been kind of spearheaded by well, I became aware of it through a guy called Romain Goulon, who used to play for Necrophagist. He's just refusing to do any recordings that require sampling. So they're trying to drag it back to people actually recording the kit, because everybody's using the same bass drum triggers. You know, like what I call the Andy Sneap sound. They've all got the same drum sound, the same compression on the guitars. And so there are some people, you know, relatively big in the scene who are saying, well, hang on a minute, you can't tell the difference. You turn your back on the record, you don't know who the hell's playing.
I mean, and you know that you got a great point with that. I mean, the thing is that you'd think that some of those players wouldn't want that. You know, that you'd think they wouldn't want to sound like that, because it's taking their, you know, like their uniqueness away from the, you know, their sound. You know, some people you expect to have that sound. I mean, just before the lockdown, I went to watch Testament, and you know, I went to see Gene Hoglan. You know, now Gene, you know, in his own way, he's a traditionalist. It is DM5, you know, set on the thrash metal setting, the best one for the job, you know. And you know, if I and when I have done that kind of stuff, that's what I use. You know, it's it's the best thing for the job, and. But he's one of the the pioneers with that. So you'd expect him to sound like that in the same way that you'd expect Metallica to have that crunchy, jigga 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 guitar sound. They should. That's their sound. But when everybody else just does it exactly the same, then that's when it becomes tiresome. So I applaud the chap that you said that's doing that, if only to try and exercise a little bit of change. And I mean, I admire all those drummers when I hear them doing that fast stuff with the triggered stuff, the triggered sound, because I know that it's not a trick for their playing. But I do kind of end up, when I hear it, think, oh God, it does just sound like a machine. And it's like, we play an acoustic instrument. It's
the
like
dynamics. That's the problem.
It's the dynamics. Now, I understand that, going back to sort of like, why a lot of people want it, especially for the bass drums, it makes obvious, it makes complete sense. And to an extent, some of the people that were initially using it on the whole kit, I understand, but it ends up where it just sounds so much the same. And, you can't even take into account the room that it's recorded in, because there is no room in the sound. It's it's
character disappears.
Yeah, and I mean, I want to hear sort of, a bit of Dave Lombardo. When I hear Dave Lombardo, I want to hear his kit, the room it's in. I want to hear it, the imperfected, but not very often ride cymbals where it clangs a little bit and things like that. You're not going to get that when somebody's then deciding that they're going completely electric, which is, what a lot are doing. And, that's it. But it's not just in drums, is it? The guitar sounds, they're all using the same, they're going through the same processes and, effects, and, the singers are taking the same approach.
And the compositions all sound alike.
Exactly.
There's a pub next to my studio here, the pub, The Unicorn, which is
I know it.
Yeah, which is a metal pub. You cannot tell the difference just by the sound. You have to be looking, it changed the band now. All right.
Unicorn. Where about is that? Hold on, let me think which one that one is.
That is on Camden Road.
Oh yeah, and what's the rehearsal place is called?
New Rose Studios.
New Rose, after the Damned song.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I've rehearsed it quite a few times. I know it. Yeah, and the pub. Okay, so you're hearing it, and
Yeah. It's always the same. If you're not looking through the window and seeing the people changing on stage, you think it's always the same band. Yeah,
well, listen, it's just the same in punk, so it's not something I would just accuse of metal. I mean, that's what I was saying about, like the newer bands, and I don't necessarily mean newer bands as in just their age, as in young. Is I can go to, like a punk gig, and there's a list of bands on, and I hear them, and they all kind of sound like, like, I don't know if you've been seeing the little posts I've been putting on Instagram, but I did one today on this, celebrating what's called the D-Beat, and it's from a band called Discharge, and the first record they did is 40 years ago, and I thought, I'll just do something to mark it, Well, I mean, you can go to like a punk gig and hear like, 10 versions of bands that, it's not just that they're using D-Beat, they just want to sound like Discharge. And it's like, well, we do something else with it. Take the influence. Discharge obviously took a strong influence from Motorhead, but they don't sound anything like Motorhead. But you can't deny the influence. It's there to be heard and possibly seen, but you don't go, oh God, these just sound like Motorhead, and then and then see another 5 bands that also sound like it. So that is something that I think in music at the moment, or let's call it any of the more alternative styles of music, is lacking. And that's, it goes back to what you were asking here about, the difference of what I see is, the differences. Oh no, actually, Mark, about, the differences. That's one of the things that's getting harder to find uniqueness.
Okay. Talking about difference, I would like to ask you, How much adaptation on your playing from the Damned to Morrissey? Because
Oh, you
not
nicked my
exactly
question.
it's not exactly the same kind of music.
Sorry, just say the first part again, Philip. I missed the first bit.
Sorry.
You know, how much you had to adapt your playing because, you know,
Yeah.
it sounds, it might be my ears, but they don't sound exactly the same.
No, well, and you know, you're quite right with that. And also the thing was with that, I went from that one gig to the other.
Wow.
So, you know, one of the last, you know, I played a show with the Damned, and then it was a couple of months, you know, but then my next show was with Morrissey.
Wow.
The difference is pretty drastic, as you'd expect. But something that I've always liked about playing or being into with the playing, I like that, you know. I mean, from when I was younger, one of the first things that I ended up evolving out of from the punk thing was into reggae. And anybody who knows, you know, the history of punk knows there's an affiliation between punk and reggae. And so if you were, you know, to explain that to maybe somebody who's watching doesn't understand it, is that, you know, that a lot of those early punk bands would incorporate a bit of reggae into their music, or maybe they'd have an exclusive reggae song. You know, the Clash are the first example of that, I suppose. There were other bands doing as well, Stiff Little Fingers, the Ruts, the Police. You know, would be like a very popular one. I mean, by then the Police were not so much punk as new wave, but you know, you can hear where they're coming from their sort of edgy up tempo tunes mixed with reggae. So later, further down the line of my playing, you know, I was a big fan of a band called Bad Brains that were an American band. So you've got like, you know, the black Rastafarians who were playing hardcore punk brilliantly, you know, better than anybody. And but they could play the most beautiful, authentic reggae. So that was a big inspiration for me. And actually, I got to play with HR, the singer, last year. I toured with him. So that was, for me, was as mind-blowing as me doing the Damned. You know, it was like, wow, I'm playing these songs that got me into this style of music. But going back to the Morrissey thing, because I was already quite a fan and enjoying, you know, it's almost like, you know, instead of being like how extreme, how fast can I do this rhythm, or how fast can I play that? You know, that seems to be a bit of an obsession with drummers, or how mad can I make this drum solo in the middle of a gospel chop song? You know, mine was how extreme can I get myself to sound, you know, as authentic as possible in this music? You know, so I didn't want to sort of join Morrissey and sound like the drummer from the Damned.
Yeah.
You know, I wanted to sort of, right, okay, I want this to sound, you know, like the record, you know, and I want the feel to be correct, and I want, you know, I want the parts to be sympathetic to, you know, to what I've heard on the songs, but not necessarily to the absolute note, but you know, so that it fitted, and thought that what I was doing was not only fitting, but maybe hopefully even slightly enhancing, you know, because you've got a bit of hindsight there. You know, you can listen to a song. So, you know, it's recorded, it's done, everybody's lived with it. So you can listen to it and think, right, okay, what's, you know, or this song is meant to sound like a drum machine. It's obviously a drum machine on the original track. That's how they wanted it. They want to do a live interpretation. Well, how do I do that? You know, do I want it to still sound exactly like a machine? Or do I want it, you know, do I want to make it sound, you know, more bouncy or what? So that's what I got off on. And that's what I still like. You know, it's kind of, I like to really get into a genre and sound like, you know, I'm living it, you know. So when I was doing Morrissey, it was a completely different way of playing. I mean, I'll give you a funny little example. One of the songs we had to do was a Smith song, and it was like a shuffle. You know, it kind of sounded like a rockabilly, an old rockabilly song. And actually, I thought it was, you know, like his current band when I was playing with him. I thought it was one of their songs because they were all rockabilly musicians, but it wasn't. It was the Smiths. And the songs that I thought were the Smiths, you know, the more rocky songs, were actually the rockabilly guys. So, you know, it was quite funny. But we had to play this song that had you kind of, you know, sort of nice kind of bouncy shuffle feel. And of course, I was thinking, how am I going to do this? You know, I'm used to really thrashing it out with the Damned and, you know, smash it up, you know, big rolls. And now I've kind of got to go to, you know. You know, I was making that kind of up in my head, really, because, of course, as soon as we started to play it in front of an audience, and also it's the first time we played that song since being in the Smiths, you know, the audience are going berserk for it, you know. And you know, then I started to think, man, this is cool that I'm playing this, but it's still having the same response as when I played, you know, like the most maddest, intense hardcore punk. Go beyond the Damned. Go to, you know, when I was playing in bands like Sacrilege and, you know, English Dogs on my first band, you know, which is kind of, you know, crossover punk metal hardcore. You know, I was thinking, right, playing this it's still having such a big effect on the audience, and you know, I didn't feel like I wanted to play it like a, you know, like a rock drummer that was putting loads more weight in it. It wouldn't have suited it.
Yeah.
You know, so my I had to be honourable. You know, I had to think, right, the key to this is playing it like that. So in that sense, it was dramatically different. The other thing with Morrissey's set is it really runs the gauntlet musically. You know, it does have its songs that are punky. You've obviously got those Smith songs that are indie. He's also got these ballads. You know, that's very powerful. You think, oh, you know, maybe if you come from the kind of background that, you know, I come from, or you come from, Mark, or, you know, all of us, you know, you often think of the ballad, oh, you know, the laid back, you know, just, you know, that. But, you know, when you're looking out and you've got people in the audience who are crying because the song has affected them that much, and they're hearing and watching you doing it live, it has a very powerful effect on you, you know?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And so, you know, things like that. Now, you don't get that in like a punk or metal gig. You know, you don't see somebody weeping, really. You see them wanting to mosh or slam dance or jump off the stage. But it's a different emotion. But, you know, the person crying in the front of you is almost more powerful, you know? So, again, it makes you, you know, take that playing and think, right, that ballad has to be spot on, you know. This has to, you know, I want that playing, that person that it's affecting so dramatically, you know. I want to make sure that what I'm conveying on the drums, you know, makes that moment for them as special as they want it to be. And hopefully by seeing that kind of response from not just one people, but people, you know, sometimes nightly, you know, makes you think, well, that's what's important at this moment in time, you know. I don't need a double pedal for this, you know, and I certainly don't need to be putting in a fancy fill, you know, that might spoil it for them. So yeah, I hope that answers it for you there, Philip.
It does very well. Kira.
I have to apologise if my internet is a bit dodgy, by the way.
Oh.
So just let me know. I wanted to ask about that actually. When you transitioned to playing for Morrissey, were you given free rein or were you given direction? It sounds like you're a very intuitive player anyway, but I just wondered, how did that actually work? Did he give you any guidance or?
Well, on the songs, well, Morrissey, well, I'll tell you a funny thing. When I went down for the audition, they hadn't even given me any songs to learn.
Oh.
So, you know, and I went down, and it was pretty informal. And Morrissey wasn't there, by the way. In fact, I didn't meet Morrissey until like the one rehearsal we had before the first show of the tour. And so I went down to I was invited to go and have a try. I don't even think the word audition was kind of mentioned. And I was like, well, do you want to send me some songs? They were like, no need, just come down and have have a bash. And it was in Survival Studios in Acton. I don't know if you know that place. Yeah. It's not there now, I don't think.
Been there.
Yeah, well, do you know what? The funny thing is, Kira, I'd been rehearsing there as a regular place, and I knew every room, and I knew every drum kit. And I knew they were all crap. But I knew how to make them all work. You know how you do? You go in there, you think, right, oh God, that's that one with that bloody terrible 12-inch tom head, but the floor tom's all right. Or, that's got the dodgy tom holder in that room, and the mismatched whatever. So I went down there pretty prepared with my cymbals and just what was needed, One of the drummers, I suppose, thought it was because of the level of it, didn't take anything. So we had no cymbals, And that's a pro drummer. It was a pro drummer, somebody that, probably just took it for granted that it was going to be somewhere more elaborate. But I hadn't. So that was one good thing. Yeah. Then when I went to the audition, I didn't know the songs. They would literally strike up, start playing. You can't see my motions. I should be further back, shouldn't I? But, they'd start playing. And I just had to join in. And I always remember one of the songs, which had a kind of pseudo-funky rhythm, I played. And, of course, I pulled out my pseudo, funky beat. And at the end of it, they said, that's perfect. You played the exact right beat. So that was something that they liked. And then another song, they played a song, and we did a really, what I remember feeling like a good version. And the MD of the band, Boz Boer, turned to me and goes, that was great, but the song isn't in half time. So I'd obviously played the whole thing perfectly with the wrong rhythm, the wrong feel. And that was being videoed anyway, and that got sent to Morrissey. And, I got the gig out of the people that tried. And then we started rehearsing. Morrissey wasn't there. He'd give guidance and points. But basically, he didn't really properly hear the set until we were rehearsing it before the first shows. He was obviously getting regular reports and updates from Boz, the MD. But, in those days, you wouldn't be doing something like this. It'd be sort of like, right, maybe I could video it and send it by post to California. But by then, we'll be there anyway. But just to give you, like a good insight to that, one of the songs we ended up doing was a song called Meat is Murder, which is, a big Smith song. It's the title of an album. And he hadn't ever played it since the Smiths. And but he wanted to put it back into the set, So we were given, the opportunity to just do something with it. In fact, he was absolutely certain he just didn't want it to sound. He just didn't want us to just do the version that was on the record. And so we're thinking, well, what can you do with it? It's a pretty morose song musically and lyrically, and it's meant to be, it's got a very powerful message. But this is, what I was going back to saying, the beauty of hindsight. When we were listening to it, of course, the Smiths wouldn't have heard that song with the lyrics and the vocals. They would have just put the music together for Morrissey. He would have approved it and sang. Well, we could hear the message and the darkness of the tune. So we started to make it, I feel like, like a lot more dynamic, so we were bringing it down, we'd bring it up just a little bit and then, back down. We put a new guitar part on it that I felt really added to it. I made the drums a lot lighter, and airy, just simple things. The ride cymbal instead of a tight hi-hat, but going to a tight hi-hat in the appropriate time, all these little things. Then at the end, we brought it down, like almost a fade out. And then my suggestion was, well, being as this is about, you know, animals being murdered, basically in an abattoir, let's make the ending really gnarly and ugly and loud, you know, like really horrible, and, you know, still playing, not like a kind of mad, but, you know, still playing the beat, but distorted, feedback in guitars, and, you know, sounds that aren't associated with Morrissey or the Smiths, really. But I felt that it suited the message of the song. You know, this is supposed to be animals in their last seconds of living in an abattoir that are about to be murdered, you know, brutally. And so we put that on it. And, you know, that's the version he still does in his set. So we had like a lot of leeway on that. In fact, you know, and I'm very proud of that. But funnily enough, when some of the reviews came out, they said that, you know, what's that band doing? They're making that song sound like Metallica just because of a loud ending. But I remember thinking, it doesn't sound anything like Metallica, you know, it's just, but I thought, well, I could use a Metallica reference because I know them and love them, you know, but this band, but most of the people understood what, you know, it was about. So that was, you know, sometimes you had kind of quite free reign, but then there's other songs that you would be playing that it's like, that's the song, you know, it's a straight, you know, it's a straightforward indie rock kind of song. This is the beat, that's the guitar part, these guys have written it, you know, it's been a big hit, we play it like that, you know, as simple as that. So it changed depending on what it was. I mean, sometimes then later on, there's artists like that are prone to do, they get bored, you know. So they say something like, right, okay, on Saturday I want you to, can we try doing a version of Boxers, like an acoustic version? And it's like, okay. For me, I'm thinking, I've never heard this song, much less know it, you know. And then the other guys are, you know, they know it because they've written it. Yeah, how are we going to do an acoustic version, you know? And we haven't got nowhere to rehearse, you know. You know, we're on the road, so we're in somebody's hotel room and sort of thinking, right, okay, well, maybe if I can get a conga or, you know, a set of bongos, and, you know, and we're literally just doing it like that, and the sound check before the gig.
Nice.
So, you know, and you're playing it to, like, you know, an audience of thousands of people who know the song really well. And you're thinking, well, you know, we don't know this version that well. You know? But so in that sense, you know, you're not even just giving free reign. It's like forced reign. You know, come up with something quick. So yeah, so, you know, it's right across the board. I mean, something like that, to my mind, is, you know what, when, you know, you're like us and you play an instrument, you know, these are the challenges hopefully you aspire to having, you know. It's about like, what, you know, we're going to be playing these gigs and you want us to do this, and it tests you, you know. Forget calling us drummers, you're a musician, you know, and when you're doing stuff like that, this is what a musician does.
Yeah.
You know, you're interacting and you're hearing that person doing that. Whoa, all right, okay, you're doing that, I'm doing this. And it's got to happen quite quickly in those scenarios, you know.
Yeah.
And maybe that's kind of, you know, going back to what we're talking about, music sounding so similar, as where sometimes it's getting lost, you know, the people aren't responding to each other musically. They're just thinking, well, you know, I like this drummer, you know, and so I'm going to play my part like him anyway. And the guitarist is probably thinking the same, and they just do it, and it kind of works, but there's nothing that's come off those personalities, you know.
Yeah.
Totally.
Sometimes the guitarist plays his parts as a drummer, so it doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, you know, for the more, you know, more modern, it's not modern now really, I suppose it's been about a good, you know, over 20 years, but that kind of synchronized guitar double kick thing, I mean, you know, I still like it. And, you know, when I first heard it, I found it, you know, very exciting. But talk about an idea that's completely overused and it doesn't matter what crazy combination they come up with now. It's you still feel you've already heard it, even if you haven't.
Yeah.
You know.
So we always finish with a particular question that Kira's going to ask you now about drum education. So do you want to round up with it, Kira?
What do you think is missing from drum education today, if anything?
I should have watched to see some of the answers. Well, I mean, see if I could have come up with something that fitted.
And then
in,
he could say,
in
"I
nicely.
agree with that guy."
Yeah, he said it all. You know, I agree with him. I don't know. I mean, is there anything missing from it? I mean, you know, you can be more informed than ever, you know, from an educational point of view now. I mean, isn't it the best it's ever been? I don't think there's a problem with the education. I think, you know, like in many senses, the problem is what people are doing with the education that's out there. You know, I mean, that's the issue for me. I mean, growing up as I did, North Wales, I mean, I didn't have a teacher, you know, I'm essentially self-taught. I mean, I've had lessons here and there, and I'll take help wherever I can. You know, I love it. You go on YouTube, there's nothing you can't ask, almost in anything, but let's keep it to drumming and find out, you know, the double kick thing, you know, you've got people there with like a modern version of a chalkboard, you know, showing a diagram, your foot's here, and you're 30. So I don't think there's a problem, you know, from the educational point. I think it's more of an issue of, you know, how people are absorbing it. You know, I haven't seen anything yet, you know, Drumeo, even this, you know, and I don't mean even this. What I mean is even this in a great sense of like, we're talking, we're discussing, you know, somebody might, you know, look at this and there's something there that answers a question that they've been curious about, you know, and that's all over the place. So, you know, you know, we're all teachers, you know, and we're for, you know, hundreds of thousands, you know, millions around the world. It's like, you know, the educational is in a good place. You know, you just gotta, it's how you utilize it, isn't it? It's how you absorb it, you know, and you know, I think a lot of the time people don't get, you know, enough out of it because they don't, you know, approach it correctly. I mean, problem I see with teaching people is you keep having to tell people the same thing. Is why? I've told you this is important. You know, what don't you understand about that? You know.
Get that tattooed on your head. Why?
Just record it and press play. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, counting. I'm a big, advocate of counting out. You know, when you're just building it up, and I always say to everybody, please do not count in your head, and definitely don't tell me you are. Later on.
Yeah.
You know. Now, okay. To begin with, I understand that, you know, they're having the habit of doing it is not there. So they naturally fall into the, you know, sort of looking up at their head and counting like that. But after a while, you should be thinking to yourself, right, okay, this counting, you know, I'll practice it. I'll be walking down the street or I'm listening to a song on the bus, you know, one until you're counting, you know, so that the next time you're at your lesson, you know, or in, you know, doing your bit of education and trying to push your, you know, your chosen subject, in our case, drums, you should be thinking, right, okay, I've practiced that counting, so I'm going, you know, what's this new thing you're going to show me? Because I'm looking forward to to utilizing this counting. You've told me it helps, teacher. So now I'm going to test it. But you don't get that.
No, you don't.
In the end, what you get is listen, you're not going to hear it. Count it and you'll hear it. And, and they're not doing it. Or they're like back in their head. And I'm like, well, unfortunately, that's the problem of the students, from not really paying enough attention or just, I suppose, they're not doing it intentionally. It's just they're taking what they think are the crucial bits of information and making their own assumptions of what's crucial and what's not. When what they should be doing is taking it for granted that what you're saying is a given, When we're not talking here about tastes, we're not sort of saying, look, I think it'd be good for you to listen to this because I like it. As an educator, you're saying, this is a method. And I'm showing you this method, and I've tried it out. I've tested it. I've been teaching it for 30 years in my case. I know it works. Trust me. Just trust me. And you'll see the results. So
if you're watching the podcast and you're having lessons, count.
Out loud. 1 yen, 2 yen, 3 yen, 4 yen.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it is. It's like like to me that is like such a critical tool for just having a language as well between teacher and student, because when you get these people, they can't already read. They can't already play, so you've got to have a little bit of a language. You can't be sort of saying, well, the beat goes boom, boom, that, boom, boom, and you hear that, boom, boom, that, boom, that, boom, that needs to be here. We're more intelligent than that. You want to be able to say, it's on 2 1 e and 2 e and 1 e and 2 e and then you can slow it down. 1 e and look, I'll show you it written down. Look, there it is, and that's one of the things, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think education is in a good place. What other responses have you had?
Not as good as that.
A lot.
Not as good as that.
I think it's probably one of the best ones, Spike. Actually, it'll resonate with all the teachers out there.
With Spike, yeah.
I agree with. That's it from now on. Do you agree with Spike?
Exactly. Yeah.
What's Spike?
So now on the question is, do you agree with Spike?
I bet there'll be a lot of people that says no, but I bet there'll be a lot of students that don't agree with it. But I bet pretty much every teacher would.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm saying it, in this most raw, crude sense. It's not an elaborate way of saying. It's just getting straight to the point. Of course, you've got to be mindful how you say it, and I say this, and it's quite funny, but of course, I've as we all would, explained it in detail to the students. It's not something you just thrown at them. Right, this counting, malarkey. Yeah, you're kind of saying, look, it's important. I start with it. I get a little rhythm and counting, clapping, just to show that the voice is important. I mean, it is an important aspect and a useful tool. I mean, if you were studying, tabla or something, you wouldn't be allowed anywhere near the instrument until you were, pretty adept with your voice.
Exactly.
And so there's nothing wrong with asking somebody to count to 4. and expect them to follow the instruction, because it's beneficial. It's beneficial for them. It's how you get started. So I mean, that's an early stages thing, but you do get it with more developed players as well, where that might not be the exact example, but they're picking the bits of information from you that they feel is valid, and not taking everything you say. I mean, when I've gone for a lesson, with Steve White, I've taken every aspect of what he said away from there, every one, because that's what I've gone from there for. If he's saying, you do it really like this slow, You know, and don't expect anything for this amount of time, you know, just keep at it, you know. I'm right, good. I don't sort of take it home and think, well, he's told me that, but now I'm going to do it like this. You know, it makes sense, doesn't it? You know, you would do the same in anything else. I mean, the thing is, I use, you know, like boxing as an analogy, or you know, those kind of sports with drumming, because, you know, with drumming, you haven't got anything where you pay the consequences quickly for your actions, you know. So you keep having to tell that person, oh, look, you need to count. Oh, look, you're not counting. Look, you need to count. Oh, let the stick needs to rebound. You know, if you have that in something like boxing, you know, and then you get, you know, like never mind knocked out, but just knocked down. You're like, wow, I didn't have my guard up. You know, that's you know, that slight that difference. I've realized the consequence of it. You know. And so you change quickly, but when you know, I'm not advocating that, you know, that's to get that physical, but it just goes to show that.
I was thinking about that.
Eh?
I was thinking about that.
Yeah, no. But it's just, you know, like when I used when I used to go and watch, you know, sort of, you know, when my children were younger, and you know, we used to take them to local kind of, you know, to go do some martial arts. You know, I really admired, you know, the teachers, and how they had those children, you know, who are so disciplined that often in a classroom and nowhere near that disciplined at that age, or in drum lessons aren't that disciplined, or guitar lessons. You know, it's like they have them, you know, making those moves, and they have them focusing for, you know, an hour, 90 minutes. And, you know, and it can be done, but the reason that they're doing that is, I suppose, self-preservation. You know, they're realizing that if they don't, you know, something bad's going to happen. And it would be good in it, not a physical sense, if you could relate that to somebody having the lesson, just to sort of say, well, it's not a physical, you know, negative thing that's going to happen, but it's a negative, is in that it's affecting, you know, what you're trying to do. It's affecting your drumming. It's affecting your learning. It's affecting your progress.
It's not physical yet.
Bob Armstrong. Bob Armstrong used to be like this. He'd be like, "Come on, Kira, on my side, whatever, up your backside." But it worked. I was so terrified. I was like, well, oh, shit, gotta do it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm sure that whenever he was doing that, you never felt threatened, but you understood that when he's doing that, he's kind of trying to emphasize, you know, like, for God's sakes, you know, look.
Exactly,
you know,
exactly. It works, because then you take it serious, kind of.
Yeah, and you should be taking it that serious, you know, as well. And you shouldn't be, I mean, another thing, going back what we're saying about, you know, education and, or, you know, like what we've got, it's all there, but you try, you know, if Bob Armstrong was doing that to a lot of, you know, like people who aren't committed, and I guess the thing with Bob was he wouldn't tolerate not having people who were committed, from what I've heard, you know, from everybody I know who studied with him. But you know, when you're in a school giving lessons and you've got like parents who are, you know, want their kids to try, maybe the kids have said it, who aren't overly committed, you try, you know, like even slightly, even, you know, being a little bit more forceful, and they crumble, you know. And then you're like, well, what have I done wrong? It's what I've just kind of slightly said, well, come on, try. You know, it's, you know, it's, you know, it's become, you know, it can be too much the other way. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that you should be, you know, in any way aggressive, especially to sensitive people. But some people, you know, they're not so sensitive and can deal with it. But it seems to me now that even people that can deal with it just don't like that, you know, and that's one of the sort of differences. They've got so used to everything, you know, like the counting. It's like, you know, I've said this 10 times now. So now I'm just starting to get a little bit jarred off. But you don't like me being jarred off. I've said it 10 times. You know?
Oh.
We all know that, don't we? I'm not alone.
Yeah. When lockdown's over, we all get together.
Yeah. You know.
You want me to be nice? Calm.
Yeah.
So, well, I think from all three of us, we'd like to thank you so much for coming on, Spike. It's been a
Thank
great.
you.
Thank
Hey,
you.
listen,
Yeah.
thanks for inviting me, and I've really
thank you very
enjoyed it, and I'll keep following the episodes. I've already subscribed. I'm a fan.
Wow, cool.
Yay!
Made my day.